everyone, and welcome to an episode, potentially the last, no one's quite sure, of My Turn, the website formerly known as Waypoint, formerly known as Vice Games, formerly known as Waypoint, formerly known as Vice's new gaming website's movie podcast. Every once in a while, we would come together to discuss loosely related movies. This time, we are discussing the 2016 science fiction film about translation, Arrival. Joining me today is Colonel Rob Zachney.
Hello, hello.
The likely emotionally devastated Patrick Klepek.
Don't get me started. Also, just as a lore note, if you look up Waypoint Radio on Acast, who provides our advertising hosting infrastructure, it is still listed as Vice Gaming's new podcast because that is how I personally registered, because Vice did not have a podcast infrastructure, and so it was just like, I'll just go figure it out and upload it.
Perfect. And Waypoint's own podcast science officer, Ricardo Contreras.
Hi.
Hi. Are you good?
Are you going to sit down this time?
Do you want to be on the episode, Kato?
I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I just needed to go get my notes because I don't live my life in 4 dimensions, so I can't remember everything that has happened or will happen.
Well,
I really thought Kato
neither can she.
was just winding up for to take a shit on us. It was just like, unlike the rest of you.
I don't live to podcast. I have a life of my own.
God. Arrival follows the story of Louise Banks, played by Amy Adams, as she attempts to translate a complex alien language following first contact, while struck by memories of a daughter who passed from a rare disease. The movie focuses on her consistently antagonistic relationship to the American military officers who brought her to the aliens, and her relationship with Ian, no one's quite sure, played by Jeremy Renner. At the film's climax, it's revealed that the alien language has allowed her to see through time, and that the dead daughter she spent the entire movie thinking about has, in fact, not been born yet. She successfully manages to get the world's militaries to stand down and not blow up the aliens through the power of love, and then goes on to have a child with Ian, knowing her tragic fate. The film's plot is actually relatively simple, despite its 2-hour runtime. I'm really curious. What is everyone's actual relationship with this movie? Because I'd never seen it before, and had heard things about it, and was kind of caught off guard by how well the emotional core of it hit for me. And so I was kind of curious as to what everyone else's relationship with this movie was.
Has everyone else seen it before?
Yeah, I had.
Okay, I'd seen
Did anyone else see it in theaters?
Yeah.
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 Fuck yeah! I wish I'd seen this in theaters.
Yeah,
especially.
I believe it.
I was just gonna say, especially a theater with a good sound system. The mix on the soundtrack in this movie is fucking spectacular.
When the jet flies overhead with the theatrical mix, it is one of the most terrifying. It just makes you flinch. And I was watching it through Apple TV. Through the headphone mix, it's mixed down. I think leveled a bit through Apple, so you don't get the true. Sorry, Denis Villeneuve, I think has some of the most aggressive sound mixing I've ever seen of a director, and that's not always a good thing. I think if you go back to listen to our Blade Runner 2049 show, universally, we were kind of in a place where it was it crossed a line into uncomfortable in the theater in terms of just how overwhelming it is. But I think Arrival's a quieter film, and those moments where it really announces itself are really, really effective. The score that is used, as well as the pieces they've selected for accompaniment, are gorgeous. It's a beautiful sounding film, and not quite as oppressive as some of Villeneuve's other soundscapes.
No, and I think specifically there's some stuff they did with the surround sound scoring that I thought was just really beautiful, and on subsequent watches has, it's very obvious they know what they're doing. This is a movie that I think changes a lot on a subsequent watch, honestly.
One would be that the moment when the jets are flying overhead, when the initial landings are occurring, reminded me of the sequence in Andor when they make a TIE fighter seem really scary. I've heard a jet engine. I've seen a military jet go over. I've heard that noise. I know it. I'm familiar with it. It shouldn't surprise me. And yet the way it's mixed and presented in here feels extremely scary. And the way that I've seen a TIE fighter a bajillion times, that shouldn't be a scary object for me to look at. And that sequence in Andor was oh fuck, there actually is a way to frame this stuff. mix it and make it seem scary and frankly alien to some degree. I believe I've told the story at one point or another, or maybe I said it when we were debating Arrival as a possible follow-up, but I made the tragic mistake of picking this film as one of the first things that my wife and I did. We are both love watching movies, specifically love going to the movie theater. We like the whole arc of like going to dinner, going to see the movie. Like it's a big part of when we first started dating, and it's something that is carried into our marriage and even having kids. And so then we saw the very disappointing Blair Witch Project 2, or Blair Witch, I think is what it was called. And that movie sucked. I did not like it. And then we went, the second night out was to go see Arrival. And I don't remember the trailer. I'm sure we watched it, or my wife just sort of trusted that it was going to be a good time. But I did not know going into the movie that a framing device for it was about the loss of a child. And so that didn't hit me as hard because I don't know how old my kid. Well, when is this? When is Arrival?
2016.
Yeah, but like
the actual date matters.
August 2016 is when my kid is born, and so this is September 2016. So they are like 2 weeks old. So maybe this actually is the first movie we went and saw. I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing up the timeline. So we have a newborn, right? They're extremely tiny. Like it is hard to. Even the film does not convey. It's a movie good about scale. Hard to convey the scale of like a newborn child if you've not been around one that is like a couple of days, a week old. It is just like, even when they're not premature, like just unbelievably tiny. And so when this movie opens with this, my wife understandably looks to me, bawling and also very upset. Like, is this what the whole movie is? And I'm like, I saw the spaceships. Like, I love alien
it's
movies.
About aliens. I don't know.
And so that, and then the movie, had plenty going on other than that, even though that is obviously an emotional undercurrent, frankly, at the heart of the film in a lot of ways. And then revisiting it, I had forgotten the last twist, the whole bit about like where the daughter exists in the time frame. And I watched this early, and I poured my coffee. Like, this wasn't a movie I was going to watch, like, with a beer. I was like, I think I would be too emotional with, like, liquor in my system. Like, let's try and do this dead sober and see how it goes. And what I had not remembered was that, like, the kid is, like, I was like, oh, I guess the kid dies when, like, it's a newborn. Like, that's tragic, but, like, very early in life. Like, I'm not saying that's good, but it's like, okay. And then it's like, it starts going through the timeline.
No, she does like
just
13,
this morning
14.
Walked my 6-year-old like to school, like hugged her, gave her a kiss. Like there's a lot of scenes in this of like a kid at the age of like 6 to 10. I think would actually, when the daughter actually passes, it's, seems like it's an early teenager or something like that. But I like, when my dad died, it unlocked crying at like things. Like I cried, but like movies, like Hallmark commercials, like something just sort of turned on me when he passed. And then, but there are like stages of emotional reaction. There is tearing up. I do it to literally everything. Like it takes nothing for me to tear up. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that there's solidarity between you and I in this moment, because I don't weep at, I weep at media, but like I cry every now and then. Yeah, but I will tear up at the stupidest fucking shit you've ever seen. I hate
I'm also sensitive to when it's just also so hokey, and like that will also get me to tear up if it is like, oh, this is bad art. And sometimes there will be like a cringe tear up where it's like, oh my God. But then it's like, I don't know how to explain that, where I'm like, oh no, I'm not. Well, I am overwhelmed by an emotion, but it is difficult to quite explain why this is producing this reaction.
Yeah, I hate it when a dog shit piece of media gets me. Like I've been, what was it? I've been watching, my girlfriend and I've been watching like the fucking sitcom Superstore, which is like a pretty funny show. It's like a fun.
Yeah, I've heard that as far as like modern sitcoms go. Like,
I've often heard it described as heartwarming.
Rob, it's a little bit too heartwarming at times.
Yep.
I found it a little bit too heartwarming. My heart was too warm, and then it started melting out of my face. That's crazy.
Well, and so that there's tearing up, which is all the time, daily basis. There's crying, which just doesn't take me a whole lot to get pushed over that edge. And then there's this, which is far rarer, which I would call exhausted sobbing, like barely catching my breath. Like was genuinely taken aback at my reaction to it. I was like, I knew what I was getting into broadly, But the fact that I have seen, and frankly, there's resonance with where this movie lands, what it is saying, like Louise's decisions. And I think that was part of my reaction to, like, my stronger reaction was like seeing my kid, my oldest be almost 6 years old, and then reflecting on the journey I've had with them over that time, and then having this put in the framework of like a movie about like, well, like, what if you knew when the bomb went off, so to speak.
While also in the middle of, the website that we've worked for
yeah, a bunch of financial instability, and
years.
I'm like wondering, it's like, well, so much for putting money away into the college fund. Every sob is just knowing my child is a little more in debt when they turn 18.
Yeah. And there's also the fact that this is a movie for me about like choosing to live with grief and like accepting that, like making the decision to do it anyways, making the decision to like care anyways, in spite of knowing when the bomb is going to go off. And we hear Waypoint Radio. Rob, as you were saying.
But I think one of the things that, like, when I look at this picture, I think there are times that Villeneuve reminds me a lot of Christopher Nolan, both in terms of, like, they're both directors who got a reputation for are frequently empowered by Hollywood to make some of the biggest, like highest budget, like most large scale films that you still get in the industry. And I think they can both have a certain iciness to their aesthetics in a lot of places. Yeah. There's a certain antiseptic quality to a lot of their filmmaking. But I think one difference is that I think Villeneuve's visual style trends in that way, but thematically he does not work that way. Like, he still is very interested in fully realized characters. But where I look at this is, in a lot of ways, I can see this is so close to being classic Nolan-esque film where it's being driven by a central conceit. Like, there is there is what should feel like a twist reveal, but it's hinted at so many times that by the time the reveals happen, you're almost living in the same sort of dislocated state as Louise herself. The point is not to like trick you as to, oh, this is what is going on. It is instead to get you to go on this journey with Louise, which I think is a key difference between Arrival and a lot of other films. And I was sort of struck by, like, watching it this time, I had remembered it having sort of this like, sort of this reveal, like it being a movie with a sort of a high concept conceit for sure. But I was really impressed by how much the movie is not driven by that. The movie is not constructed around concealing what is happening here.
Yeah, I also think that, like, one of the things so here's the thing. I didn't know the twist. Renata did not go into this movie knowing the thing that happened.
I don't think it has a reputation for that, which is helpful, where, yes, there is a twist to the storytelling structure and the framing, but if you were to, read a list of, like, top 10 movies with twists, like, I don't think Arrival lands on it. I don't think that's how it's, like, thought of in the culture, as, like, damn, you gotta watch this, because what happens at the end is gonna blow your mind. Like,
right.
If anything, it's, like, a real compliment to the filmmaking and the storytelling that it just slots in. Like, twist is the accurate way to describe it because it's a reframing of what you've seen. But, like, I think twist often is thought of as a kind of a gotcha, or it's cheap, and I just don't think there's anything cheap or gotcha about this.
No, not at all. I also think that, like, so much of, like, my first, like, couple hours with first, like, hour of this film for me was, like, watching it and seeing our, like, central character Louise as, like, fundamentally colored by grief. So much of the way that this film, like, follows her and, like, sees her move through spaces feels like watching someone who's grieving, and then knowing that this is just what she has been living in, is this, like, perpetual stream of painful memory while removed from its context, is, like, totally recontextualizes what we've seen to that point in a way that I, like, kind of really love.
Well, it's as a parent, you, like, so it's portrayed in the film on your first watch as sort of you're assuming we're getting some this happens as a prologue, like this is ahead of the events. But as a parent, like, you are constantly having what you I guess you could call a premonition, or like thoughts about horrible things that could happen to like your children, your family, and you sort of have to live with the idea that this thing you have invested so much of yourself in could, at like the snap of a finger, disappear. And it is about living with sort of like the risk calculation, the emotional calculation you have made about building this thing around you. I don't know when the jig is up necessarily, but like I know that it could be like any day, and like it is common to have that level of premonition like feeling about horrible things that could happen that would remove the emotional foundation you have built for yourself. And so I like really empathize with like the way it is structured in there, because even though we are given a technical explanation for like why it is occurring to Louise, that is like incredibly common for parents.
I mean, even outside of parents, I just want to say that like as someone who's lived through a lot of like, I've had a lot of family members pass, like a kind of like a staggering number, and a grief will do that to you. Like it does just leave you in this place where you go into everything doing that calculus, and like having to make the conscious choice to care about things in spite of knowing the score. And I think the film like pulls that off like really well.
Well, something I find like so interesting in this film is to like, the movie certainly sets you up to feel as if, yes, the loss of this child is like prologue to the action of this. And when we meet her, she's in that frankly deeply improbable waterfront
fucking
chateau.
Frank Lloyd Wright house. The fuck are we doing?
It is so funny. Yep, just a humble linguistics professor at what looks, at a nearby college.
Okay, but she's the foremost
lakefront
linguistics professor. Like she's only second on the list when the fucking aliens arrive. That's pretty high profile at that point.
Wait, wasn't she actually? Was she second on the list, or was she first on the list?
She was first.
She was second.
Yeah, she was first. No, they go to her first, and then they go, "We're gonna go to Danvers," and she was like, "But
the way the guy explains it is that she still has her top secret clearance, and it's still good, and that's why he literally says that's why I'm here and not in Berkeley."
Got it.
So she was technically the second choice, although she actually should have been the first choice. Like we learn that the gotcha on the
no,
like,
but all of that is in
funny.
The context of a negotiation where it is like, don't press us too hard because we can go to our real first choice, but actually she's the first choice and she calls their bluff.
Yeah,
the gotcha though is so good. I just want to note that her being like, "Hey, could you deliver this burn to this motherfucker who lives on the other side of the country for me?" Like, we don't talk like that, but I need you to deliver this burn for me. And then I'm just going to like chill out over here for a little bit. It's just like delicious.
Yeah, it's a really funny moment that also like does a really good framing of just like language is fuzzy, y'all. Like be aware. Like we like take it for granted how much meaning can be shifted around like the meaning of words, like, but it like does a really good moment of just like, remember, like words often have multiple meanings, and you can see the direct line between. So it was a Farsi word, right? I forget the exact word.
No, it's Sanskrit. It's the Sanskrit word for war.
Sanskrit word for war, yeah.
Which is either, I believe it was an argument,
or a desire for more cows.
Yeah.
Right? Like this idea that like the like origin or like base meaning of something will shift and change over time, and also just like the kangaroo thing is also a funny like bit, just because it's like, oh, that's not true, but it makes my point.
It makes me wonder if she's just fucking lying about the Sanskrit word for cat, for the Sanskrit word for war.
I think that one has to be real because they must have gone to look it up, right? That's how he.
Well, I think there's a third party. I think that's the thing is
exactly.
like the minute she like my feeling about Forrest Whitaker's character is that the minute that challenge is put down, he needs to understand why it's put down and why, like, and probably goes to see what this guy says. But like at the start of the film, it all feels like she is in the wake of the death of a child, and certainly the color palette and the it's a Max Richter piece, right? That's playing throughout all this.
The opening and concluding track. It was most recently featured in The Last of Us.
It's used in a ton of things.
It's used in a lot, I guess. And Richter he was the composer of like The Leftovers, like which has a very similar sort of soundtrack to this. And weirdly enough, I was reading that because like it's hard to imagine those scenes without the Richter track. Like it's extremely powerful and evocative. It disqualified this film from being nominated for the score for an Oscar because the thought was that if you remove those, like those elements are enough to sort of like make you confused on the contributions of the composer, which I think is bullshit.
Johansson.
Yes.
And like, so, but looking at the way this film opens with her sort of appearing to be in the state of grief, I think like looking at it from the vantage of like knowing the full story now, I also kind of wonder if what we are seeing is like, one, is this just kind of just how her life is before this event, which is that she's sort of a withdrawn academic, a bit isolated, or is it that throughout this entire film, everything we see is colored by her awareness. Like the texture of the memory has changed, right? That like even memories before she met Ian and had a kid and lost a kid, even those now, when we see them, have this like slightly tragic quality to them. Because they're now recontextualized by the before time to a great loss, which is kind of the like gift and curse that she's given at the end. Like she will never experience time the same way that other people do. And so she will always live with that, foreknowledge of both the exact amount of joy that, life will hold for her and the exact amount of grief. And there is no like blissful ignorance even in the past now for her.
Yeah. God, we also just regarding like the use of foreknowledge in this movie, the fact that we know from the jump that Ian is going to fuck off the second he learns like what she knows. Ugh, brutal, absolutely devastating.
That did not that little bit had not really settled with me as much on the first time around, and I really sat with it like the second time around because you can't make a calculation of like how, the happiness of a life and what makes like what fulfills a meter to be like worth living, but the notion that we can get this later, like the question of free will is not really addressed, like it is left purposely kind of open-ended a bit in terms of like what you can and cannot change as a result of your sense of the scale of time, like time as a more complicated concept than we as humans perceive it. But the notion that, Louise proceeds with the child knowing what awaits them, I certainly found myself leaving is like, that's tough, but boy, like making that choice, you've made that choice for that child in some ways. And that is,
yes.
It's what, like, if you were to tell me, like, because someone was like, well, when I was talking about the movie on Twitter a little bit ahead of this, it's like, look, I don't know what's gonna happen to my kids, right? Like, but if you told me that like my daughter was gonna die at 8, I do not know if I could have if it's free will exists, like I have foreknowledge of like on the path I am on that results in a child that passes at the age of 8, I would not choose to have that child. I do not think I like should be allowed to make that choice to bring them into the world knowing that awaits them. If I don't know what awaits them, like we don't know what awaits any of us, right? Like well, cancer could be in me right now and takes me out a year from now. But like the notion that exists and then judging, turns out like 14 years is good enough. And and you're going to make me pretty happy during those 14 years. You know what I mean? There's no easy answers on that. It's complicated, but like, that rubbed me the wrong way the second time around.
I mean, it's an incredibly, like, it's an aspect of this that is, like, it is uncomfortable to sit with, because, like, she signs a kid up to die of what looks like a pretty horrible cancer, and, like, goes ahead with that. But there's also kind of some implications that the fact of the child's existence is also a key component of why they're able to, like, reach a rapport and have this breakthrough with the aliens, that like the child is like carrying bits and pieces of the like mental Rosetta Stone she uses to figure out what the aliens are trying to tell her. So there is an aspect of like, it is the fact that she's granted this glimpse that also like is the key to helping her understand exactly what the aliens are trying to get at and exactly what it is they're proposing to give humanity. But yeah, it's an incredible gut punch here, and there, all these things. You always end up with questions about like, why can't you? You could change the future a little bit, right? Like you could have that conversation with Ian in advance and like get on the same page about like here,
or even
like
your daughter, right? Like would one part of what is given to Louise as a gift, or like what could be given to humanity is if you knew what was coming, how would you live your life? And I think the answer that Ian has, I'm paraphrasing, but like I would speak more like honestly, like more immediately to try and enact that change. I mean, she is given a very clear opportunity to tell her daughter, I know that you're going to die, and like you can have that information and choose to do with that what you wish with the rest of your life. There's a gift she could give the daughter, but I think selfishly chooses to not tell her. I mean, it's a burden as well, but like you've already made this gambit.
Is an issue.
The kid exists, like to suppress the knowledge that what will happen to them, I think is undeniable.
Which is, I think, the real thing that drives Ian away is like the sheer, like, not only is he out of the loop on this discussion, but like from then on, the daughter says like, he doesn't look at me the same way. And I think it's because at every turn you're having these moments of like, what do I do here? Like, how do I address this person? Now, the funny thing is, I think sort of makes this so effective is that to a degree, this is just a heightened and more pointed version of the decision everyone makes when they decide to like bring a kid into the world.
Yeah.
Like this is like, here's the thing. It might happen when a kid is 14, it might happen when they're 80, but like, whenever you have a kid, you are signing up a being to like go through the process of death, whatever that is. Yeah, exactly. So
it's a difference in scale, obviously, but I think to some point the story is trying to consider that. Like we all know where it ends, death. Yeah. Like all of us will die someday. And it's
probably going to be a less like pleasant and peaceful experience than we might hope. Yeah. Like, and that's also part of the deal.
And so like it becomes very much about the kind of experiential, like going through of like continuing of life. Like it's
experience
a little bit
because she is centered in this whole story.
Yeah.
Like it is all loops like a planet around her. It is like we are framed through her. Yeah. It is her decision. You know what I mean? Like, you're right. Like, I think that's a broader philosophical message of the film that you can walk away from. But also, like, the movie provides no agency for the other characters to participate in that process.
But we see how the aliens address this when they describe, like, where is it Costello, the one who dies?
Abbott.
I believe
Abbott.
So, yeah.
Where's Abbott? And the answer is Abbott is death process. And like part of it also is the thing that she also gets from the aliens to a degree is that the heptapods, the thing that she gets from them is this idea of like outcome is not necessary. Like, yes, there's an inevitability to demises and such, but like from the perspective she is given, there's also this, I think, like, she's kind of rendered a bit alien from normal human experience by being given this. But I think part of it is also, you also suddenly recontextualize things in terms of a person exists for a while and they bring a certain amount of happiness and joy into their lives and the lives of other people. And then inevitably that span will reach its terminus. And from the perspective of the aliens, like, it sort of seems like this is, you take all of it, right? It's not, you take it all as it comes because this is just how life tends to play out. And so there is no sense of, there's not the same sense of tragedy where it's like, oh, life was supposed to be on this trajectory and then something happened and now we're in the realm of tragedy. It's sort of taken as a whole all at once. And that is just kind of you were able to make of life what it is and not exist completely in the space between like hope and disappointment, which is where a lot of us like find ourselves living linearly.
And there's like, I mean, there's also the whole, like, taken another way, the idea of them living non-linearly and like kind of experiencing different times at the same time like this is the fundamental quote unquote trick that the movie plays, right? Like you assume on the first watch the things that she's experiencing are memories, right? Like ultimately going through a life, like even when a person does pass out of it, you always still have the memory of their existence, right? Like it's the way that, like, yeah, we are linear beings that exist in linear time mostly, but like, you know, like you can have dreams that are so real that like it's like reliving the moment, even if it's shifted because dreams always shift things. But still, I feel like that also is a thing that the movie likes, obviously, is like getting at. It's just like there's always like, and like, you know, people refer to this a lot as well. Like if you think about the way people think about legacy or the what they leave behind as being like important, it's because there's the idea that the way people remember you is as important as what you do on a day-to-day basis, which, like, you know, yeah, depending on like the use case, like you get like a you know, the like power hungry version of that, like versus like the idea of like I'll be immortal because I'll be remembered for all time, Ozymandias bullshit, or the like more kind of grounded, like your loved ones will still hold and cherish the memories they have of you after you're gone.
One thing I will say that I think is really interesting here, because I want to return to something that Rob said a minute ago, is that like by the end of this movie, Louise's experience of being alive is now fundamentally alien to literally every other person she's ever met, other than the heptapods, because like I cannot imagine how completely that would reframe your understanding of death. Because like effectively the movie seems to imply that Louise can theoretically at any moment live in any other moment of her life. Right. And like the moment that is the case for you, suddenly the calculus on death completely fucking changes. And like the thing that I think is that, you know, Patrick, you talking about like agency and her daughter's agency here, that I think is lost both on this film, but also on the character, is the fact that like, not only does she lack agency, but at this point, Louise is making a decision for her daughter using a different framework of being than what her daughter will experience. Like we don't see her teach her daughter that language. We know that she can, right? Like we know that like fundamentally, this is a thing that she could be capable of understanding. And that is not given to her in a way that like almost makes it feel like the movie is like raising up Louise as this like fucking superhuman who's the only person capable of actually understanding this like mode of being.
I feel
in a way that like kind of
do the aliens provide a gift, or are they just really fucking up humanity?
This
is
is
like
this
an
is
elite
the
class
thing.
of intellectuals. Because it doesn't sound like Ian learns the language.
Like,
you know what I mean?
She like writes books. You see her teaching, but I wonder how much of that is like, but we can never go. There's like if she's basically found a line where before this you will still experience time normally, because it would just. I think in the end it's both a blessing and a horrible curse, right? It is both of these things to kind of live this way.
So the thing is, I think like their language is a product of how they perceive existence and time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She translates the language. When they put her in the mist and like imbue her with their Etch-a-Sketch like dust, she gets the perception.
Well, I will say
she's having that perception much earlier in the movie.
Yeah, this movie believes in the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Like it fully does believe in Sapir-Whorf.
That's why they bring it up like right near the beginning, right?
Do you want to explain that in case someone has not immediately rewatched this? Or
Basically, it's a theory that the language that you learn structures your thought. And your like the possibility space that your imagination has access to is defined by the first language you learn, or at the very least your primary language. So to learn a new language is to learn a new way of being, and that is something that this movie pretty clearly believes, like wholeheartedly. and makes the case over and over again.
Because
hang on. I don't know that it like believes it wholeheartedly. I think it creates a conceit where it's absolutely true, right? Like they create the language exists because the aliens have special superpower that is like beyond our capacity to fully understand. So like the language,
but she starts to get it when she starts to understand the language. Like the first time she like bowls over and like looks like what she's having is like a panic attack and then a sense memory of her child. That happens before she goes in the mist. There is one thing that like gives them an out if they want it narratively, is that it's also, I believe, the first time she touches the glass with her hand, right? There's physical contact there, which you could say is maybe that's when the transfer starts to happen. But I do think the reason they bring up that theory is because they actually want that to be what you're thinking about as these memories, which are actually the future.
Well, because the audience a framework to think about it too. Yeah. It's not just like waving a magic wand. It's like, oh, okay, there's a science term for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only pushback I'll say is that the way that they use they're communicating through mahjong, and that like fundamentally structures how they are interpreting every single thing that is coming out of their like the heptapod that like China is interfacing with.
Yeah,
everything is being filtered through the language of conflict, and that like fundamentally shapes how they approach that. And so I think that like the movie does go a little bit beyond making an argument that it is a fantasy conceit and is useful in this one instance. Instead, by invoking it in that other way, it begins to make an argument that like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is like just true. At least the film is making that argument, it feels like.
I feel like the film is making that as a means to an end. I don't like think the filmmakers, or at least that's my interpretation, is like this is just a convenient narrative device to get us to this point, as opposed to like, hey, actually, like, like this is how we think language works.
Yeah, I think it is part of the conceit for sure. I just don't know that the film is super invested in unpacking and analyzing the Whorfian hypothesis.
It's like purposely wishy-washy. It's like, look, we need to get here. Like this helps us get there, and I just don't know that. I think you can poke a lot of holes in this film.
Yeah,
but I just don't think it matters because it's just not that concerned about those holes necessarily.
It is partially structurally a little weird, but focused on the emotional and the experiential, which I think is kind of what the sort of message, or not mess, but like the message that they want you to kind of walk away with, right? Is the idea of living life as an experiential thing.
Which is why, like, even on this conversation, I feel like I can come across as like, I think what Louise did is like unfathomably cruel. I just don't think that's what the movie wants. Like, I think you can have that feeling on the character,
right?
Which is something that sort of comes out of like a discussion on a podcast where I have to start like expressing these feelings. But like the feeling I have coming out of the movie both times is not that. It is exactly what you're saying, Kato. It's like life happens, be in the moment, experience what you have with the people that you have for as long as you have it, because it can disappear. And I feel like that is what the movie is saying, because like so much of like logic bits of how this film works, like I just don't think it cares that much. Not that it doesn't care, like it is trying to build a structure, but I just think it is very like there's a reason that music is there, right? Like they are going for like an emotional punch that I think lands really well, because I can sit here and be like, I think Louise is a bad person, but I don't actually believe that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I think like I can give you like the argument
logically.
For that.
I can work through why I feel this way.
I can lay out why I think like this movie portray is like actually holds a supervillain like as their main character, and they make you cry around that. But I don't think that's the feeling and message of the movie.
Yeah.
Like a movie that this reminded me a lot of, particularly around like the death of a child, and like Louise like sitting with that. The other movie this reminds me a lot of is Tree of Life.
I was gonna say when you were talking about the aesthetic differences or similarities rather of Nolan and Villeneuve, I immediately thought like, okay, but Villeneuve in this movie specifically is channeling Tree of Life for a lot of especially the opening prologue, whatever sequence, the like.
I think you and I are both thinking of the finale of Tree of Life, right? Which is about like a family with a complicated at times very obscurely told saga in Terrence Malick's Tree of Life is reckoning with the death of one of two sons in this family, and it is a shattering moment for the surviving brother. It also is like touching on wounds that have existed in that family for a long time, and sort of the end of that film. So the film is also about like the cycles of life that, like, you know, just as like humans are born, they live, they die. There are cycles of extinction. The film draws like explicit parallels between extinction cycles on Earth and the inevitability and tragedy of like the end of an individual life, that like death comes for everyone. That can be for an entire ecosystem, and it can be for a person. But at the end of it, when the film is sort of like reconciled a lot of its turmoil around this, and it begins getting even more explicitly metaphorical, it sort of ends with a lot of the characters of the film sort of accepting that, like, yeah, I think the moment that really sticks out in my head is actually the mother of the two boys, who, you know, one of whom dies in this film, is sort of like addressing the universe of like, it's okay, like, take my son, I give my son to you. It's very like, you know, pseudo religious, but also at the
Very
same time, I think is yeah, but I think it's getting at something too here, which is that, you know, in the face of like losses like this, to an extent, there is also what's the way to put it, like a liberation you need to achieve to an extent, that these are not things that just happen to you, and they are not things that just happen to individuals. It is just like part of the fabric of existence, and to exist is to submit yourself to these rules, in their glory and their sadness, and that's definitely a like the payoffs for this film, even just in terms of tone, shot composition, editing. It feels so much like Tree of Life, Kato.
Yeah, no,
like, I think you could run the last acts of these two movies and like very different films, but I think like the timing and texture of them would feel really apparent.
Even was the movie Impenetrable? I've heard it's like
that was wildly overstated. Like,
yeah, I think it's mostly
it's Brad Pitt, right? Am I right? Am I wrong? This right?
I think that might be part of the problem.
I think
people are like, can't wait to see Brad Pitt, and you will not see very much of Brad Pitt.
Okay. No, it's a tone piece, right? Like, if you go in knowing that, you can enjoy it in that way. Like, but it isn't even like, I feel like it's less tone piecey than like Stalker was, or, you know, like.
All right, well, that's good to know. That's a good bar for me to work
like
from.
It's still there, it's still close, but I think I would even put that one as more like tone piecey at times. But, you know,
no, I don't know. I put a Tree of Life and nostalgia, I think, are not like it's not quite Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man, but
it's like Spider-Man pointing at Miles Morales. You know, they're different colors, but in the same ballpark.
One thing that I will say that I'm kind of fascinated by aesthetically about these movies, or about this movie, is despite being about like the importance of like living and like choosing to live and like, you know, focusing on like the experience of being alive, it's a movie that does not spend much time actually sitting with what it means to like live and like be around people. It's really trying to truck through like it's many competing plots. It's not like a particularly, despite focusing on Louise almost the entire time, it rarely feels like a very intimate movie. The camera never like gets particularly close to anything. We never see like moments of connection or longing outside of those like, you know, filtered memories, in a way that is like almost incoherent, like almost incohesive, not incoherent, almost incohesive with the movie's like thematic core. But maybe it's just an extension of the fact that like there is an alienness to this way of understanding and seeing the world that means like the intimacy kind of falls away in face of the bigger picture. But I just found that like stylistic note like kind of interesting.
I do think
you're right. Like, we don't know anything about Louise, right? Like, she a good partner? She a good friend?
It sounds like you already made up your mind, Patrick. I think you know all you want to know about Louise, and you're preparing for the deposition.
Right, like we spend no time like with any character in a setting outside of like this, like the invasion happens immediately.
I do think there's a certain amount you can read into like the way that she goes through the first like quarter of the movie, but I feel like the like the I think they pull out all of the like closeness, intimate. Like there's a lot of that in, like you said, the memories, and like I think that is to create that contrast most drastically as they can to like in this like during the crisis, during her like trying to figure this out. She is still not actually connecting with other people, right? Like this is her at the beginning of the film. Like she walks through a crowd, like there's a crowd of people because the news has broken that morning. She just goes to class. She is like, oh, where is everyone?
She also goes to bed.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Where is
she's
everyone?
Annoyed that her students are distracted. She's annoyed that her mom is scared because fucking aliens landed.
This is a movie where at the beginning of this film, she is not connecting with other human beings.
Yeah,
at all. That's a good point. And then like the point being like eventually like when she can find that connection, like it's much more beautiful and intimate and worth life worth living versus when she's kind of like deeply just kind of a depressed person who doesn't interact or connect with anyone. And I do think that's part of that is why the middle of the film is the way that it is.
In particular, because I do think as we get more scenes with her and her daughter, I think we do see a lot of warmth and connection there.
Yeah,
and I think it's because we see that we like that it draws attention to the lack of connection for her at the start of the film. But like the scenes with her daughter also get more affecting in some ways because they get less freighted. Like the opening montage is very, very sad for sure.
Yeah.
But the things that are like quietly devastating are her helping hand with homework and just having that one little moment where she's just a little bit shitty and immediately regretting it, where she's like, oh, you want science? Talk to your dad. But then, you know, the interplay of past and present, she remembers the right concept for her daughter, referring back to the sequences in Montana. But like, I do think the capacity to connect in that way is something that she increasingly gains through the film. And it's we see it most readily because like the sequences with her daughter are like obviously the most intimate and unguarded, but we also start to see them more with Ian toward the end of the film and the brief glimpses we get of them as new parents.
I would say we get them with Ian once he stops fucking shitting on her career for 17 whole seconds. Which man, what an off-putting way to introduce a character. He's just this man shitting on linguistics as a field. Yeah. Damn, I thought you would have been a scientist.
I don't
embarrassing
like Ian at all. The one thing about this movie that feels the most like I don't get the romance. Like I felt something due to the manipulation of the music, I feel like, and mostly around the idea of the daughter happening.
I think it's like a relationship born out of like a shared trauma, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I
don't think the movie sells it is the thing. I don't think Jeremy Renner sells it. And he's too like, God, what's the fucking line he says at the end? I like said it out loud before he said it on the TV, and I was so mad with myself.
No, but okay, I will defend it. I will defend it. Where he's like, I spent all the time looking up at the stars. And nothing. What is it like? The thing that surprised me the most wasn't
it wasn't meeting. It wasn't
aliens. It was
meeting you.
But that comes right after the line that he says. Like you should say the thing that you were thinking.
It's such a line. It's such a line.
No, but it's terrible.
Wait, Kato.
Yeah.
Stop.
What?
You're telling me. You're gonna tell me right now. Kato, how long have you been married? No, stop. Don't laugh. How long have you been married?
It's almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Great. You've been with your partner for what, 15?
More than that. Yeah.
More than 15 years. Great. Are you going to tell me right now? Are you going to look at me in my eyes and tell me that you've never said some corny ass shit to your wife?
As
Are you
as
looking
a
at me
joke, but not
No,
as
that
an
is
inciting
no,
moment.
I
The inciting
refuse
moment
that.
for a
We're learning
relationship.
some things on this podcast.
I rebuke this so fucking completely.
The first time you told your partner you loved them, like, it came out just like, yeah. You know, like, I mean, that was the
This is
clumsiest
my
shit I ever did in
problem,
my
is
life.
that it's not,
Hold on.
it does not feel like, it feels like a pickup line and not a, like,
Oh, I don't
protestation
think
of
so.
love.
That's not.
This is
that's
what
not
it
a
to
pickup
me-
line.
So here's my
The
thing.
amount of corny shit that has come out of my fucking mouth when talking to my
People can be
girlfriend
corny,
is
people,
just
but there's a different
repugnant.
type. There's a different type of corny. Maybe it's just because it's coming out of Jeremy Renner's mouth. But there's a corny where it's like saccharine and over in what's it called earnest, or like overly earnest. And there's a corny where it's like, wow, you just thought of that line and thought you were hot shit, didn't you? And for some reason that line specifically like hit that way for me.
So I agree. I think it's a bad line, but I actually think it's good in the picture because so if we think again about like evolutions that have happened over the course of this film,
Right.
when he meets her, they are two territorial academics. We've seen that for how she like knifed the guy in Berkeley.
Just
And
fucking
his first move is to be like, you know, he's reading, I think, her thesis. It doesn't look like a published book. It looks like a thesis. Maybe it's a galley, a galley edition, a galley copy. But his first move is to acknowledge, like, you seem pretty smart. You seem pretty good at this. But we both know I'm the real scientist here. We both know that, like, I'm in the real scientific field, and you are soft science. And it's an immediate like ploy to establish a bit of pecking order and like carve out a bit of territory. And then by the end of the film, he gives a line that is, it's a little embarrassing, but it is also like how we feel about the people we love is corny. Like it is like the thing about it that kind of works for me is that if you believe that it's a pickup line, then it sounds like the shittiest thing in the world. But if you take it as like, this is how he sincerely feels in this moment, then I think the ridiculousness of it begins to work in its favor because it is so like open-hearted and unself-conscious, which is what he has said he has kind of struggled to achieve prior to this. Like, it's a line that like on first hearing I was like, boy, I don't know about this, but I kind of end up liking it, and I kind of end up liking the character more than I thought I would. I think there is the fact that like Renner had this like really sudden rise after Hurt Locker, and he was in everything. Like Hollywood does this so much now, where they just like run Renner into the ground as an actor. Ren.
I'm putting my hands up. We need to go to break. We have a question about this. I think if we go to break, we go to the question. We can enter the Renner dimension because I've been holding off on the Renner dimension because
15 minutes.
Let's install the Renner app.
Yeah. Let's everyone open up your phones. Go to your favorite music streaming platform of choice. And one sec, let me what was that album called? Jeremy Renner.
Something
I
like
can't remember the soundtrack. No. He put a music video.
Jeremy Renner, main attraction.
Yep.
Maybe I'm just conflating Jeremy Renner with this character.
I think a lot of people have that issue when they regard Renner performances now, but we'll get into it.
God. All right. And we are back. I would like to begin with a question. Bouncing off of Rob's previous statements. From Adam. Is Jeremy Renner a good actor? He's in two of my favorite movies from the 2010s, Arrival and Wind River, but then he's in stuff like Bourne Legacy and like 30 different Marvel movies. Those movies have their place as entertaining the action fare, but they're nowhere near the level of stuff like Arrival or Wind River. Is Renner wasting his talent not doing more stuff like this? Or are these movies so good in spite of him? What was the deal with that social media app and his country music albums? I don't have anything against him personally. I hope he's recovering well from the snowplow incident. His career just confuses me. Anyway, Arrival fucking rules, Waypoint fucking ruled, and I will miss Waypoint dearly. FCGH, Adam. Where do y'all come down on Mr. Renner? Like,
Robbie
broadly?
recoiled at the Bourne Legacy thing, but I didn't know in what way.
Oh, like Born Legacy is great. People don't like understand like how much better that movie is than its reputation like would imply.
And that's the movie right before the like actual finale, like the final film, which
so
I know
there is a there's
regarded.
an ugly like it's really kind of ugly how this falls out. So
Bourne
Tony
Ultimatum?
Gilroy wrote the scripts for if not all three of the first three Bourne movies, at least two of them, and Matt Damon and Paul Greengrass, I guess, were like really close collaborators on this. And like at some point there is a split where the studio lets Gilroy continue on and Gilroy, obviously like director of Michael Clayton and showrunner on Andor. They let him continue the Bourne series with the Bourne Legacy. And yeah, it stars Jeremy Renner. Edward Norton is in it. And it is a very Tony Gilroy type movie, and it's I think it's one of the better Bourne films that we have. It didn't do super well because I think the marketing it's a spinoff, right? Spinoffs can be hard to sort of launch, and then when Damon and Greengrass, I think, team up for the final movie, Jason Bourne, which is dog shit, like terrible movie. You like Damon gave this called shot, which was, yeah, like it was me and Greengrass, like basically holding that series together. And, then they went off and tried to make one without us, with Gilroy. It's such a piece of shit. It's such a piece of dog shit that, they had to bring us back to clean it up. And then that movie sucks.
And then end the franchise.
Yeah, and like that movie's like unwatchably bad. And so it ends up kind of proving the opposite of Damon's point, which was that like maybe the thing that made this all work was to an extent Gilroy's fascination with bureaucracy, and not just Greengrass's ability to stage car chases.
Confirmed, by the way. Tony Gilroy wrote the first three and the Bourne Ultimate and the Bourne Legacy, rather. Yeah.
Legacy.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think Bourne Legacy is like actually terrific. Like hands down, great movie. Is Renner great in it? I don't know. I think he has good moments. It's kind of a sprawling story, but for a movie that is basically Flowers for Algernon with automatic weapons, it's pretty damn good. No, that's what that movie is. It is Flowers for Algernon, but like the dude who gets like the brain pills is turned into a Treadstone killing machine. And if he doesn't get the brain pills, he goes back to being like not only like profoundly disabled due to like neurological issues, but also I think like war injuries. Like I think he was somebody who was also maybe blown up a little in a war. But anyway.
Just a teeny little bit blown up.
Little bit.
Well,
I mean, basically, that was how the U.S. fought in Iraq, right? Which was like, all right, trooper, get in this vehicle and ride around and see if you get blown up. That was the shape of that war. Hopefully, it's a teeny
little bit. You can go home.
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's how that war played out. It's pretty grim, but that was the experience of a lot of that war for people there. But anyway,
Wind River is a great film. That is.
I think Hurt Locker's pretty good.
Yes. I think they're making a sequel to Wind River, but without any of the principal act. It's strange. I don't think Renner is I guess maybe you could argue that he's definitely got bro energy, right?
Yeah.
But there doesn't seem to be he doesn't seem that toxic. Like he just seems kind of like a over the top dude, and like that expresses it in the kind of confidence that would allow you to produce an app around yourself and like a music video. But he seems like he makes the Marvel movies because he genuinely enjoys making them. You shove in an Arrival and like he'll meet the moment for what his character is asked, and sometimes actors are just like that. He clearly could be in more pressing fair if he chose to be, and it just sort of, I don't know, it fits his fancy, and a lot of times it doesn't. He seems fine. Like, I don't have strong feelings on Jeremy Renner. He's there, and usually he accomplishes the task of the character in front of him. And even if leaving Arrival, I'm not thinking about him as an actor very much. I don't think he took anything away from with his performance.
No, I don't think anyone in this movie, like, honestly, no one's performance in this movie really like hit home from. I think Amy Adams does good. I think Amy Adams does good. I think she does a good job with this character, but like, this is not a movie where I finished it being like, wow.
Yeah.
Good job, everybody. Honestly, like, did Forrest Whitaker kind of take an L here? I did not love this performance from him.
It's more
completely off base.
No, he's not bringing a full Forrest Whitaker performance, I think is the way I would put it. Like, Forrest Whitaker often gives his characters a slightly, I don't know, like offbeat energy, even when they're kind of like straight man characters.
Yeah.
But here it is just a very standard, like, I'm the military man type performance, and there's just not a lot happening to it. There may not be a lot happening on the page, but that is sort of where these things, like, that's sort of how it scans to me.
One other note about Renner's character before we move on. Someone sent in an email informing. Perfect. They also sent a question. Okay, I just want to point out that Neil Dumbass Tyson said that they should have sent a cryptographer instead of a linguist, and it's one of the dumbest things he's ever said while trying to prove he's smarter than everyone else. Thank you for all the pods. Question: how would the aliens say "fuck capitalism, go home"? Cheers and love to y'all, Denis. The one thing I will note, that sounds like a character that sounds like something that Renner's character would have said. That sounds like a cut line from this movie where they introduce her and then she's like, just a cryptographer. But how do you think aliens would say "fuck capitalism, go home"?
Well, I think these particular aliens seem like they would have a real struggle comprehending some of these concepts.
Yeah.
Capitalism? Okay, well let's break it down. What concepts do they get? Fuck.
One presumes.
One presumes? Okay. Capitalism.
And see, there we run into it.
Yeah. this is the big one. Go home. I think they understand. They exist at
home they do okay with. Go they go great with.
Go.
We see that guy. We see them walking.
The walk.
Yeah. They get it. They get go.
I kind of wish there was a little bit more.
Bit. Yeah, with the.
It's not a very lighthearted film, and so it's nice to have like a brief moment of levity. And I almost found it's like, I kind of wish there could have been a little bit more of a montage.
Could we get a little
Jeremy
dance?
Renner doing actions and the creatures responding.
I would love to see the heptapods do just a little dance with Jeremy Renner.
Yes.
Because like the walk is so silly goofy, but I just want to see one of the heptapods go, woo, woo. Like, let me see a heptapod raise the roof, please. Yeah. I'm begging you.
I do like. I think genuinely though, like a concept I think would be difficult to translate to them is like so much of capitalism and like the way our markets work is based on assessment of risk and uncertainty about the future, and immediately I think the nature of their species transforms how their markets work. And maybe they don't have like anything we recognize as a normal market.
No.
So I think that's where I like begin to find them interesting. On the other hand,
wait.
All of this is kind of a down payment on a loan they're going to collect in 3,000 years.
Right, but that's the thing though, Rob. That's the thing. They don't like this is an exchange, yeah. But like there's not like a sale happen. There's not like they're not trying to get an edge over us. Is this?
We don't even know what we've just traded.
No, is this a society?
What are we helping you with? Like favor could mean a lot.
What if it's really bad?
Yeah, like
really bad.
there's a galactic war, and we're gonna need your body sex as energy to siphon, like to fuel the war effort. Like, I don't know what that means. What we're signing up for, which apparently I've not read the novel. This is based on, but like none of that is present apparently in the novel. Like the aliens come, go, and we have no sense of why the exchange occurs at all. I understand why that is present here, to give like a little more closure to the actions. But I guess there's a lot more ambiguity in the original novel or novella. I don't know if it's like an actual whole book, but
I've seen it called novella. Yes, I think it's shorter.
Yeah, like longer than a short story, shorter than a book.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to note that in the adaptation process they introduce a motivation for the heptapods, which is absent from the original story.
Okay. Here's the thing. If they believe in non-zero sum games, if they just will give people things with the assumption I'll get it back in a couple thousand years, right? Do the heptapods, is it a society of just dudes hanging out? Have they reached the point where it's mostly just a society of dudes hanging out?
This feels like the type of, given where the story goes, this feels like the type of sci-fi that believes that any society that is sufficiently advanced enough to do interstellar travel has to be some form of utopia, because everything else would have imploded on their own planet by that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I think they're just hanging out.
Or things really fucked up where they are, but they know in 3,000 years it's all gonna go bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think
they're sort of unreliable narrators because of the nature of how they perceve time.
Yep.
And it's also, I guess, are we to believe
uber reliable narrators?
Well, until you have the power,
right.
you can't fact check what's going on here. And I mean, again, I don't think the movie is actually asking to be brought up to this level of scrutiny. But are we to presume one's glimpse into the future goes as far as our own existence? Starts at birth, ends at death?
I think it's experiential like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. The implication I get is that they can experience their own lives distinct from time, and it is
so they live at least 3,000 years.
Yes. I think that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, the thing I was going to say is I think that they live at least 3,000 years.
Yeah, no, I guess
which is why it's such a big deal that Abbott dies. Abbott's death process feels like a pretty significant thing culturally for the heptapods. I at least I get this implication, right? That death is a pretty rare occurrence and a pretty significant one. At least this was the impression that I was left with.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's also kind of they don't really try to save themselves. They see the bombs being planted, and it's this is the important moment to get a message across to Louise. It is not a moment to be at first I thought there's tapping on the window because it's hey, look behind you. I'm pointing.
Come on.
But then of course, what Abbott does is saves Louise and Ian and directs the blast into their chamber.
Yeah.
It throws them into the entry tunnel and
also
seals.
They know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So they
Abbott knows Abbott
yeah.
knows their death.
Yeah.
They're they know they're about to die because they have to push them so that they can, and that's
it's very a prayer for Owen Meany.
What?
You don't elaborate on that?
I feel like sometimes Rob will drop a reference. You have to put your hand up if you understand it.
It's a John Irving novel that is basically the entire device is a Christ-like child in I think in the US in the 50s and 60s has premonitions throughout his life of being called upon to do something heroic and self-sacrificing, and spends much of his life both trying to alter the sequence of events that will allow them to avoid dying heroically, but then also increasingly moves towards working to make sure that they are capable of answering that moment. And I feel that to a degree, there's a bit of that in play as well, which is from Abbott's perspective, all of this is and here is the moment where we this has to happen. This is the end of my story, but it's also sort of the necessary thing to do for the good of everyone else in the story.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to completely fucking derail us. Are y'all familiar with the television show Renovations?
So I've seen this on my Disney Plus app, but I haven't,
What?
watched it.
Okay. What do you think? What do you think the premise of this show is?
I mean, my guess would be.
I mean, he got hurt in like heavy machinery. My
Is it Home
guess is
Improvement?
he's like a hobbyist, like around different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, my assumption would be it'd be like Home
Renovations.
Improvement or like him,
It's Home
doing like
Improvement?
projects.
Okay, there are projects. However, Renovations is a 4-part original mini-series that embraces Jeremy Renner's lifelong passion to give back to communities around the world by reimagining unique purpose-built vehicles to meet a community's needs. Episode 1, Chicago, building a mobile music bus featuring Vanessa Hudgens. Episode 2,
God.
Los Cabos, building a mobile dance studio featuring Sebastian Yatra. Reno, building a mobile recreation center.
What?
I mean, it fits the aesthetic. Again, he's like kind of like a harmless, like positive bro. Like that is none of that shocks me.
India, building a mobile water treatment center. This fucking is the idea of Jeremy Renner just being like, what if we make a show where I put a bunch of buildings on wheels? It's so fucking good.
I will say, so like it does appear that like Renner also had a really acrimonious divorce where there were allegations of like violence and abuse. But there's
What?
everything stems from this divorce case, and it doesn't appear that we ever get anything beyond court filings. So it is like there are some pretty serious allegations against him, like centering on a custody dispute and child support disputes. Like beyond that, as far as I can tell, there's nothing on that beyond what was filed in court.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Well, moving on to our next question.
Yeah, can we leave the Renner zone?
Please leave the
We need
Renner
to
zone.
Quickly leave the Renner zone.
Alrighty. I think this is a good question for us. Do y'all prefer dour or campy sci-fi?
Do we classify this as dour?
I think we would. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. It's not campy.
Do I have to pick and choose?
This is the thing. Like, well, prefer, I guess, like, what are you going to pick? Not
I think you have to.
it's like a night is like you have two in front of you.
Right.
What do you naturally?
Yeah, hang on though. Like, no, I guess I can't, because like then you have to like, what do you do with Wrath of Khan?
What do you think? What do you do
This
with
can't be.
Wrath of Khan?
You looked at the villain.
It's Star Trek. What the fuck are you talking about, bro?
Like, a campy film does not necessarily mean there isn't
Depth.
weight attached.
Yeah.
to it. But I think ultimately Star Trek has a lot of camp.
I agree, but I also think like that camp is also still capable of like really heartrending and like provocative stuff.
Yeah, so
So maybe that's the Rob answer is like, look, I want a little bit of my over the top, but also a little emotional heft to my characters.
I just think it's like it's hard to sort them cleanly into these buckets.
Yeah.
I'm going to push back against this actually, because I think that genre fiction the strength of it is that it can take really bold, really big swings, and that like sometimes that happens in a camp way, but like that's still doing the thing that genre fiction does. I don't think that like emotional depth and like impact is unique. Or like separate from camp. I think that often they are very closely interlinked because stupid. Because of
Yeah, but I don't think dour is a genre. Like
dour is
like,
not a genre, but it's a tone.
It's a vibe. I mean, like
It's a vibe.
this director's work, Nolan, like
Dour.
their entire filmographies are dour.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like now I think Nolan just doesn't really care about the emotional interiority of their characters. Like, I guess Interstellar is, Nolan's best attempt at that. I've been told, like, well, if you had a hard time rewatching Arrival, like, be careful about revisiting Interstellar. But like, these are all like these. I think dour is a good way to describe both of these filmmakers, like entire sets of works, really.
Yeah.
I think I do like dour. Like, I like dour from my sci-fi more than I. Like where sometimes it depends on like where you fall in genres, right?
Mhm,
like in
mhm,
horror, I'm going to prefer camp. Like I like straight, scary like films, but like at the end of the day, I'm sitting down to watch a movie. Like there's a reason that like a lot of what I have is like all the Child's Play movies, all the Halloweens. Like I'm there for the camp and the over the top, and we can also appreciate something more straight.
What was that? Gore, whatever. Did you see that?
What?
It was like Gore Master or some bullshit. Do you remember? Was it?
Oh yeah, I got a T-shirt of it upstairs. Hunky Boys. Yeah, I'll look it up. That movie's incredible. Like my turn is unfortunately, reaching a conclusion, but it will be upsetting that I could not have found a way
to make us watch that.
Psycho Gore Master.
Psycho Gore Master. There we go.
I will at the end of this Psycho Gorman.
Psycho Gorman.
At the end of this podcast, I will put a link to this so the three of you can watch it. It is a fantastic film. Anyway,
Kato?
It's so difficult with these things because it's always going to be based on my mood on any given day. I do feel like I lean a little bit more towards dour though, just in general. But like Rob pointed out, like there's a lot that does both well and interestingly.
You gonna look at Turgle and say that? Tell him that you don't like him?
I like Turgle. This is the problem. I like Turgle.
Are you gonna look at Turgle and say I don't prefer you, Turgle?
It's Star Wars I don't feel like
is Star Wars even science fiction?
Yeah, I mean, fair. Yes. It's not. I mean, it's not dour enough to be fully in the dour thing, but I don't think it's actually even that camp. Honestly,
Star Wars.
If you're gonna say
camp and pulp are like sitting right next to one another.
Okay, but pulp
Star Wars isn't.
It's still different. It's still a different term, right? Like,
yeah, but I'm agreeing with you. I'm not saying they are the same, but if we're making buckets,
right? It would fall. Yeah,
pulp is going in the camp bucket. Then more than it is the dour.
Yes.
Shit.
But, yeah, no, you said what you said. You said
I'll just say that Star Wars
you looked at
really
Turgle.
sci-fi.
You said I hate you.
That's fine.
Hey, did y'all know that Renner is also a palindrome?
Whoa!
Shut the fuck up. God damn it.
I didn't want to bring it back to him, but I was reading that fucking Wikipedia page and I was like, wait a minute. They made a whole
letters.
fucking thing about the palindromic name of Hannah in a movie with Jeremy Renner in it. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you comedy joking me right now?
We did get two that I think are probably worth answering. So this one comes in from Anonymous. Hope I'm not too late. You are not. You came literally sliding into home plate with this question. I've been refreshing it throughout the recording. My partner and I both view Arrival as a romantic movie, one that represents how important love is in many ways. Do you all have movies/media that are similarly sentimental in relationship, even though it is arguably not about that? I think at least from their perspective, like I think it is possible to view this film as like a romantic piece with a sci-fi wrapper around it, right? Or like about, your connection with children. I don't know, but I understand what they're saying. So I think the broad stroke of the question is like, is there a movie that like has a romance like at its emotional core, but is wrapped around a different framing that you enjoy because of that?
I've been ruined. I'll say this. I've been ruined because not to get too into my whole shit, but I have a partner I love very much, blah, 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 blah. I fucking get sad about everything now. I get sad about everything now. I think it's very embarrassing. But before I would have said the answer to this question is like broadly no. But now the answer is everything. I cried at Superstore. Are you fucking kidding me right now? I'm a mess. I'm a little bitch.
Is that what I'm thinking of? The America Ferrera? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The America Ferrera sitcom. Yeah. What's your beef?
No, I just didn't. I wasn't.
No, Kato, what's your beef? Come on.
I have no beef. I've never seen it. But you cried at that? That's it?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's serious.
I'm ruined.
Or is that movie just that good? Or show?
It's pretty good. I would say that welcome to Superstore Corner. I would say that it is like at its best better than a lot of The Office. Not all of it, but definitely like better than a lot of it. I think it is a solid workplace comedy.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I've seen this movie, even though I would rank it as one of my favorites, but I can't articulate too much about it. But does Gattaca fall into this bucket? High concept sci-fi movie with a romance at the heart of it.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen Gattaca.
Fuck.
I know.
Shit, I'm pretty sure you love Gattaca. I can't
think
tell
I
you
would.
why, but like I know that it's one of the first DVDs I owned. Shit. Okay. Well.
Who was up?
Show's ending.
I was gonna say who was up. Who's
Yep.
picking next? Oh wait, is that still up?
The axle is broken.
Ethan Hawke and I forget who is the. Let me look it up.
So, I think
Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke. I'm loving Ethan Hawke. Watch anything with Ethan Hawke in it.
Is this where they met? Because they were married for like a number of years, right?
It's a good question. This is 1997, so
probably. I think they were married
totally
through like
wild
all
to
of the
think of.
2000s. Yeah, I'm like. So the thing is, like, I think so many movies, like, even if the movie is not centered on romance, by God, a romance will happen in a lot of movies and will end up being kind of central to it. So, like, I think Arrival fits in with a lot of films like that. Yeah, like, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I think it is a romantic movie, but it's not it's not romantic in the sense that it's about like romantic love between two people. That is part of it, but it has a romantic affect to it. Like
I
the
think that is the
entire
right-
thing is, like
totally.
it is about emotion and feeling and relating to one another far more than it is about the philosophical question the questions that it provokes. Those are still like interesting parts of this film, but fundamentally, I think everything centers on a fundamentally romantic approach to the story.
It feels like
And just humanity in general, right? The shots with the Louise and her daughter are shot arguably romantic, right? It is not like, hey, make sure like we have proper perspective on the characters and we can see who's talking. It is shot like quote unquote cinematically in order to convey like a heart-wrenching emotion that I think you could describe as romantic, for sure. Kato, you were gonna say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say I feel like Arrival is like it less raises those philosophical questions as much as it invokes them, right? In order to tell its story, it's more like this is part of the fabric of the emotional core, but we're not gonna try to answer or like really deeply consider them for too long because the important part is how you feel about it.
This comes from Jonathan. Heavy emotional question. Less. It's not about dead children.
Thanks for clarifying.
Just felt like that. Yeah. Arrival reads as a movie about coming to peace with inevitability and what you cannot change, and from a global perspective across time. Waypoint is ending, but has been a beacon for thoughtful criticism. Obviously, you can't go back in time to change Waypoint, but what are your thoughts looking forward for others looking to work on criticism and engage with media? Have loved all of your work and getting to listen to your podcasts and reviews over the years. Jonathan.
It's a hard thing to do, but I think the best thing that you can do for any sort of creative pursuit is to do it because you want to do it. And if you can figure out how to make it a job, great. But sometimes you can't mix those two, and it's unfortunate because of the fucking structures of our society. But don't try the best to find space in your life to give those sorts of pursuits space, even if you can't make it in like the media landscape, right? Like, because that's fucking, it's blowing up around us. But like, even if it's just for like you and your friends, like, that nobody else is going to read it, as long as the pursuit and practice of it itself is bringing you some sort of joy, then it's worth doing.
So when we got the news that the site was being shut down, I wept like a little bitch for a while, and then went on to like have like some pretty long conversations with my girlfriend about like why I was like so fucking devastated. And I will say that like I do think that the end of Waypoint in some ways represents like an end of a certain kind of like games journal, like a certain kind of like a games culture and criticism, and one that is like worth mourning, and that like really got to me, because like I don't think that structurally and people will be able to make a job out of this really, other than like very, out of the extremely micro scale. I don't think that there will be people like producing criticism for a living in this way. And that makes me pretty deeply sad. But to Kato's point, I will say this. Like I've said before, I did this job and like did criticism broadly because I really wanted to. And then I kind of fell down a ladder into doing it for a career, and was like kind of astounded to do so, and was very lucky to do so. But like, a thing I posted just like a few hours ago was that like Tears of the Kingdom is going to come out. I'm going to really love it. I'm going to play it at my own pace. And like, I will probably write about it. And I will probably write about it months from now, after I've like actually had time to like sit with it and to apply the level of like critical thought that like I kind of haven't been able to for the last like year and a half. And I'm excited to do that. And like, I think that like long form and like the criticism that is a project of like long-term is the product of like long-term thought will like always exist, and will continue to exist, just not on this particular website, and maybe not on websites in the way that we think of them right now, because the internet is breaking in a way that is deeply disorienting.
One, it's funny to think about, like, I know that this person, Jonathan, says like, well, you can't change things. But even if I grant myself the ability, I don't think there have been multiple pivot points at Waypoint. They all came from outside forces. I don't look back at the 6 years that we've had here sort of collectively as though even if I was granted the power, like, okay, with hindsight, what could we have gone back and done to move the needle and change the outcome? And I just don't. I think we played our hands pretty well at most steps of the way. And the forces that pushed us in different directions were not ones that we could influence. And often we were pivoting and changing based on just what we could do. And that wouldn't have changed with foresight or even hindsight. But the other thing I'd say, I do think Waypoint's influence or perceived influence on criticism is overstated. I think Waypoint has become sort of a beacon, but I sometimes don't. I get really wary at the way we get talked about, or the apocalyptic nature of Waypoint disappearing, as though it also means that the only place that criticism existed is also disappearing. And I'm not saying that any of you are suggesting that, but I do think that is sometimes the vibe. And I think what it is symbolic of is, I think part of what people looked for and enjoyed about Waypoint was that it tried to center criticism and tried to make that work as a central tenet of its website, and all the associated challenges that came with that. And I don't disagree with that notion of what we tried to do over that time. But I think people, the existence of things like Substack, like criticism will live on. Like, we'll find, like, people want to read interesting things about the work, the media that they engage with. I think it is absolutely, totally arguable that making that a full-time career is extremely difficult, nigh impossible, especially if you're not already starting up the ladder, where you can sort of establish a brand or a fan base that can help you achieve that work. I'm like aware of the privilege of that position that, many of us can find ourselves in. But I'm actually like much more, I'm pessimistic on ability to make that the central part of your pitch for like a website that makes money. I'm more optimistic on the ability for criticism to continue thriving, because people will want it and it will find its way out as a result.
I think there's a couple aspects to this question that I've sort of been thinking about. One is that notion of, how do we evaluate these things? And part of it, I think for me, has always been that as a freelancer, instability just comes with the territory. I've had way worse days than when we found out Waypoint was shutting down. Try being owed like several $1,000s by an outlet, and then finally like paying you, and then also telling you that like contract will not be renewed for the next quarter, like all that steady income just gone immediately, and you have no way of replacing it. No severance. It's just like situation engineered for maximum damage. And like in terms of how this shook out, it doesn't rate on the scale of like personally terrible days. And I think part of that has also, like, I've sort of had that in the back of my mind the entire time I've been here, which is that like what they say this a lot about in like athletic careers, right? Like they tend not to finish well. Very few people go out, hoisting the championship for the champions trophy for their league, like over their head. Most people, they go out because they're injured or just because they've, the prime of their career is kind of past, and they end up playing kind of pedestrian games for pedestrian stakes. And you kind of have this question, like, what was the point of all this? Like, how do we, was this a good ending? And I think from my perspective is, no, the ending of Waypoint, I'm not happy about it. I don't think it was good. I've seen worse, but I don't think it's not good. But we had a number of years to do a job that was pretty great and do work that we're proud of for a site that people respected and connecting with an audience that really appreciated what we're doing. And so I find it very hard to, at the end of this, be like, bitter about it, because ain't nobody can take away the 6 years I was at Waypoint. Like, that's just, I've got it. I've got that. Like, you saw occasional, like, there can be occasional shitheads being like, haha, finally, like, happy to see Waypoint go down. And it's like, yeah, after 6 years at my dream job, it ended. Boy, what an L I took.
Website made it more than half a decade. Like, how fucking hard that is to do.
Right. And so it's like, it was a great way to spend a significant, span of my professional life. I always knew how special it was. And I always knew that at some point we would probably find ourselves, I thought we would find ourselves in a meeting where we would see how this was going down. I didn't think it would quite shake out the way it did, but like, always kind of knew from the jump that this was in some way, shape, or form coming. Like, I remember, I think literally my first or second day at Waypoint, I got access to traffic figures. And they weren't great. And it was, I remember talking to Danielle at the end of that day, and she was like, so what do you think? And there was no way to spin those figures. They were bad. It was showing that like audience, like that what Vice wanted, which was massive audience acquisition, it wasn't panning out. Our numbers were okay, but it wasn't turning into what Vice clearly wanted it to be, which was like and this was delusional, but like a Kotaku or Polygon like scale site with
destination
a team.
place,
with a very small team. And the minute that didn't happen, it was clear they were going to start like trimming back further investment and resources in it. I think it was only a few months later that they axed Mike Diver, who like built the foundations of the entire damn thing. And so like literally from like my first or second day at Waypoint, it was clear that like, okay, we're going to be on to plan B here before too long. I think since then it's been plan B, plan C, plan D, and so on and so forth. And most people don't get to cycle through so many of them, and they don't find ones that work. And we
lost our name and got it back.
Yeah.
God.
like that's like that itself is like the biggest middle finger to all those folks who are like, oh, finally. It's like, bro, like they took away our name. And then we're like, you want it back?
Yeah, so like I think like my view for this stuff is always that on balance this has worked out pretty well. As for what the future holds for stuff like this, it is so hard to tell. I think so much of what I see is just a fundamental, Ren said the the whole internet is breaking, and to a large degree that's true. It's breaking so thoroughly that I almost like the optimist in me hopes that it can't stay this broken forever, and that something has to give, and you see opportunity sort of break through again. That like this current structure is just too hard to do anything new and dynamic in, because I do think like there is, as far as I can tell, there's actually two major things that make it hard to do something like what Waypoint was trying to be, or what Waypoint eventually turned into. The first is that finding new audience is really, really hard. It is so hard to build an audience now compared to just 6 years ago, and it was hard then. And it is harder now, and it continues to get harder in large part because of the 3 sites problem, right? Which is search, social. What's the third site? We talk about this. It's like the 3 places where people spend all their online time is like they might actually be talking about your social media platform, Facebook, and search, effectively being your 3 portals. But this notion that people don't go to their favorite websites anymore and hang out. That doesn't exist. People don't read blogs in that way anymore. So like building an organic audience is so much harder than it was 6 years ago. And 6 years ago, it was so much harder than it was a decade before that. And then the other problem is the threshold for sustainability has changed quite a bit, because most of the ad market is bought up straight out of the gate by Google and Facebook. And so the things that would have sustained a lot of publications, 20 years ago, all that money is just like skimmed right off the top before it makes its way to people producing content. Yep. And so the threshold for success is much higher, because now you have to be mass market, because it's only at mass market that you get the level of like income via ad revenue that will let you sustain yourself. And the subscription model doesn't work for startups because it requires an audience. So that's kind of like those to me are like the major obstacles to this. And my hope is that these conditions, as bad as things look right now, my hope is certainly that these conditions are so terrible that they also can't fully sustain themselves.
Mm-hmm. I will say the last thing I'll say on this particular thing is that like I think I've also had like a pretty different relationship to the site than the other people here, in terms of like, y'all have been in it for what, 6 years, Patrick, you, and then 5 years, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, nearly 7, because it's
nearly
lines up with
I'm nearly 6.
You're getting 6?
It
okay.
lines up with my kid being born. So like we were done June 2nd, she was born in August. So I'm almost 7.
Almost 7. Is that like, I was 16, okay, I'm gonna do the thing. I was 16.
You're okay. You're allowed to be young.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you. Sorry. I was 16 when like Waypoint started, and like it was like, to say that it was influential upon me would be kind of a dramatic understatement. I would say that in some ways it helped to set the tone for literally all of the work that I did in university, the work that I did in games journalism broadly. And that tone was important to me. But also, and so like the end of the Waypoint does feel like almost the end of like that era of my life, from like, ages, fucking 16 onwards. And like, that's a bummer, but also like, I don't know. I think that someone else will find an opportunity to build something, and will do pretty incredible work, with that opportunity. And I'm excited to see it. Fucking Godspeed, if that's you. Hey, is this the end of my turn?
For now, I guess, right? Like, man, really opened the door to go watch Jeremy Renner in a Bourne movie. I feel like
right. Here's the thing. I almost Patrick, I almost messaged Rob, should we do a mini series about the Bourne movies? What would be?
We were supposed to do the Mission Impossible miniseries as well. That was weird.
God. What would be?
Why not do both?
Listen, folks. Listen. We have how many days we got? How many days do we got? Let me check here.
Little advent calendar of modern espionage action thrillers. Hey, how's Waypoint marking the end of the website? They're watching spy action movies.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
Like 8 of them.
Yeah.
they watch.
It's okay. We
each.
can play the Metal Gear series at the same time, and then just say it's a
Just add that
crossover
on the
event.
Waypoint 101 calendar.
They
Just-
can't stop. Like at this point, truly, we can't just be like, yeah, sorry, I don't know, guys. We did the Pride and Prejudice thing again. This time it was the Bourne movies. Sorry.
Well, like, what if we just didn't work as much?
hey,
I mean, listen.
hey,
hey,
that sounds
hey,
good.
Listen. Let me be clear, Patrick. That sounds great. That also sounds great to me.
I will say there's been a bit of like people are like, oh man, like how are you guys gonna like wrap up Waypoint? Like how, and it's like I am maybe slightly less excited about planning my own funeral than some of y'all. It's like I want to mark the occasion, but at the same time, like going out with a big old bang requires a fair bit of like think about what it takes just for us to do a short, not even a save point, just for a short little stream that we're all getting together in New York, and like for a couple days we're gonna hang out, we're gonna stream. Now imagine doing that knowing that you're gonna lose your job in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's like we'll see.
And also,
we'll play
Vice
it by
won't pay
ear.
for it. And also, Vice won't pay for it this time. Jesus.
We'll play it by ear, but I do like it does bother me that the door is swinging open for Bourne Legacy. It's right there.
It's right there.
It's right there.
So is Tree of Life. Hey, through that theme of child death and reckoning with it, Children of Men, also just like right over there,
Yeah.
driving through the woods.
Feels like you've thought about this, Rob.
I'm always thinking about my turn. You know, if you think about it, Arrival's a lot like Big Night.
Stupid. This was a bad show idea.
Was I even next?
Yeah,
Was I next?
I think you were.
Yeah,
weren't you?
you were actually. Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah,
What's
this
the
is this is. Yeah, what is the website? There is a website.
Whose turn is it?
Fuck.
What is it? Let me go to the Discord. Search.
It happened right after. we
Turn
asked
my
for it.
website in. No.
Shit. Well, a wonderful person made a website. And
Is it
then
Baron
we
Bussy
forgot-
again?
I don't know. Might have been.
Searching website in the Discord didn't help. There's that word has
Shit.
been used.
They built this tool, and now we can't
Someone
even.
made
Hold on. I tweeted about it from the Waypoint account. I feel
Okay,
like
okay. We have a
I
lead.
should hold on. Let me load up the profile.
We have to really figure out whose turn it was going to be.
I had a feeling it was Rob because we haven't done you in a while, right? Like, yeah.
Back with that a bit.
I'm looking at latest. Okay. April. Oh fuck! Of
Oh,
course, I
here
can't
it is.
search the word website.
Here it is. WhoPicksNext.com.
Is it?
Rob
Wait,
picks next.
whopicksnext.com?
Mm-hmm.
Just who picks next what? Wow. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's astounding that we have that. Yeah.
Yes. It is
Well-
Ren's turn. Rob picks next.
Rob picks next. Yeah.
So Rob, what would you have picked of that
Well, didn't think I had to have an
that
answer.
bounty? No, now
Fuck.
you do. You have to leave us on the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I think I would have made you bastards watch the Bourne Legacy.
Yeah.
What would that have been like watching it out of context? Because I've not seen the
So
other one.
that was the
same.
other $1 million question here is, so that movie is oddly structured because it actually takes place during the events of the third Bourne movie. Because they're doing a lot of tie-in
What?
stuff where it's like, and here all this stuff is happening over
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Here's
yeah.
a sequence with some of the characters from
So
the
it's
other
like-
movie.
It's like Back to the Future Part 2, except that you're following a different person this time
Totally.
around.
Yes. Because basically the premise is like in the third Bourne movie,
Oh my
he
God.
blows the lid off Treadstone and reveals that there's this entire like secret assassination program.
Ah.
And so the people running the secret assassination program do what you would naturally do in the situation was kill all your operatives and shut the entire project down before people can answer questions. One of those operatives is Jeremy Renner, and he don't want to be killed. And so we're off to the adventure. And it's real good. But I'm so curious if it would have resonated at all if you didn't basically know all the like
Right.
Bourne lore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is why
At
we
least
would have
we
had to
mean-
do
yeah.
the full series, and like we just can't.
Or
We
what
just
if
don't
he
have the
didn't
time.
just to see? didn't do the
Yeah,
whole.
I think I would have gone in
how
cold.
weird.
I think I would have gone in cold.
Does it work?
And then,
Yeah.
Does it
yes.
work as a film on its own?
And because that is on a list of shame for me. I know I would really like those movies.
Same.
And just for
Same.
I think it was something. I actually think it was like the Matt Damon part. I was just like, do I really want to see him in an action movie? Like, not really. Like, I think that was part of why I never watched them. But then people were so effusive about how good they were. I was like, okay. But then it was like, we're in the fourth one. It's like, well, now I'm 4 movies behind. But
Okay, you want to know like something that's really wild on the Bourne Legacy? Maybe the option wasn't there, but it does feel like a sign of the times. In a pivotal scene, playing opposite Jeremy Renner is another operative from the Treadstone project, played by Oscar Isaac, and he ends up in a not quite a bit role, but it's also not fully fledged like
well,
supporting
this is
role.
early Oscar Isaac, right? I mean, this is long before he becomes a heartthrob with Force Awakens.
But now you can't help but think when you watch that movie, what if you swap these two? Like, what if it like how does the Bourne Legacy go if it's Oscar Isaac on the run for this entire thing, and not Jeremy Renner? And
there's more natural charisma from Isaac. That is 100% for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I guess we began My Turn with the knowledge that like we'd never finished the sequel. It was about My Turn was an experiential movie podcast where we accepted that we couldn't know the destination, and instead would just have to really embrace the joy of going from film to film. And you know, what better way to end it than in the middle of a cycle?
Yeah, it was going to be we never got to announce it, but like that was going to be the model to fix Waypoint 101s, which have just never worked. You want to know something? Go back 6 years ago and tell yourself, don't do 101s. You're never going to make these fucking work. Like, stop. Like, you're going to try 3 times.
You can't fit an old game into an ongoing like games media. You can't do it.
It's just too much work. So the thought had been that what if we like My Turn Waypoint 101s, and the bar for what you have to play to participate in the conversation is just whatever you decide to invest in.
Or we do the thing like Austin brought in ringers for the Mad Max game.
Yeah.
And that might have been the play.
Also a lot of work.
Right.
Still takes someone out of pocket.
Also, we had to pay guests too.
Yeah.
Like we have to pay.
Yeah.
That's a budget issue.
Yeah. There's a reason that one died on the vine as well.
Well,
so R.I.P. Final Fantasy Tactics.
rest in peace, Final Fantasy Tactics. Rest in peace, Waypoint 101.
System Shock is going to come out before you do another fucking stream.
Rest in peace, System Shock.
At least y'all learned a little something about Sid Meier's Gettysburg.
Well, you know what they say? Waypoint's a site that has been defined by some amount of follow through. No one's quite sure how much.
An amount. An attempt.
Hey, you can find what's left of our website at vice.com/en/games.
I guess that is the other way you could go there.
Follow us on Twitter at Waypoint. Rob, where can the people find you?
For now on Twitter at Rob Zachney, but man, once I get that Blue Sky invite, bye y'all.
Do I have one yet?
Wait, how do you fuckers not have some? What?
I didn't go. I just didn't get.
You didn't
I didn't
fish?
go begging. No.
Oh,
fish.
yeah.
So I was just like, it'll come around when it comes around.
Yeah.
Kato?
Zero invite
It'll happen
codes.
where it happens.
Where can the people find you?
At _Kato_ appears for as long as Twitter still exists. Not going to be
Patrick.
long now.
Where can the people find you?
You can find me at Patrick Klubik and putting together a Substack over at patrickklubik.substack.com.
You can follow me on Twitter at Ren or Raven. You can watch Waypoint streams, what's left of them, at twitch.tv/Waypoint. And you can watch my occasional Silent Hill stream, Silent Hill Saturdays, on whatever day of the week I decide to stream, at twitch.tv/Ren or Raven.
There was
all one word.
There was a question about a wording about a tweet about the final Dead Space.
Yeah, Austin
Stream.
also messaged me and was
People
like,
really
is that
thought
the
it was
final?
like the end of.
No,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
clarified in the Discord. That's a wild.
Sure.
Step
if anyone-
I will put out a tweet.
Yeah,
Clearly, I missed. If you weren't in on the joke of Dead Space having 3 final streams,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
clearly that came.
That was the
that is
final
my bad. There'll be at least a
Dead
couple
Space
more.
stream. We finally
Final Dead Space.
Dead
stream. I will
Space
go
Double
do
Dead
that
Space
right
was
now.
finally put to rest. It finally
Yes,
died.
yes. Much like the Hive
But it
Mind.
won't be the last time we stream, probably. I mean, there's a fucking Zelda game coming out today.
Yep.
Like, I feel like we have to do something.
I want to do something.
Actually, if things go according to plan, there will have been like a cool surprise related to that. Is what I'll say. I have to talk to you after this.
The
podcast
podcast will be out. That
No, I know,
any
but like I'm
surprise
just
would have
saying,
already
it'll make sense to people. You know, I don't want to explicitly say it in case it
we're
doesn't.
living
Surprise.
non-linearly in
Yes,
time.
non-linearly.
There we
Yes,
go.
you'll know what I mean if it happens. If it doesn't happen, you can't get mad at me because I didn't tell you what it was.
I don't know.
Win,
If this,
win.
Maybe the cool surprise was absolutely nothing happening at all.
I power washed my deck. That's my cool surprise.
Waypoint's a non-zero sum game. Probably.